Hi guys, how you all doing? Welcome to the Newcastle United training ground, where I've been up here today doing a couple of live updates, and the reason for that is the club have announced earlier today that Eddie Howe has returned to the training ground to resume his duties as Newcastle United manager. Now, he was at the training ground yesterday, took part in the training session, got his feet back under the desk. He felt well enough to return again today and is taking part in the training session earlier on, just over my shoulder there behind those trees this morning, as Newcastle gear up for a must-win match against Ipswich in the Premier League on Saturday, with points at a premium and Champions League places up for grabs. So look, really good news first of all that Eddie Howe is feeling better. That's been just under 3 weeks. It'll be 3 weeks tomorrow since I did a sit-down interview with Eddie Howe, and I think it was ahead of the Leicester game, and he told me he wasn't feeling well just before the interview started, which was unlike him. He then came into the press conference afterwards and complained that he'd had some dental procedure the day before and was struggling a little bit. So that was the start of things. And he then felt worse over the coming week, managed to get down to Leicester and do the game, but he didn't return to training afterwards. And of course, he then missed the next 3 matches, the wins over Manchester United and Crystal Palace, and then Saturday's chastening defeat to Aston Villa. So he's been missing for training, really, around the training ground for 2 weeks now, just over 2 weeks. And it was 12 days ago that he was admitted into hospital in Newcastle, and of course he spent that weekend in hospital, missed the Manchester United match, and what then happened was the club put out a statement, of course, on the Saturday afternoon to say that he would be missing from the dugout for the Manchester United game, and he was going to spend a bit of time in hospital. Now, my understanding is that he spent 4 nights in hospital before returning back home to recover with his family at the middle of last week. So he's had the best part of a week at home trying to recover from a pneumonia diagnosis. Of course, we got that additional statement from the club last Monday that Eddie had been diagnosed with pneumonia, which of course was a very, very worrying time for him and his family, and of course everyone associated with the football club. It had to be serious for Eddie Howe to miss a match, miss training sessions, be absent from the place for 2 weeks. He's a very hands-on manager. Some would say maybe a little bit of a control freak. I think he'd probably admit that himself. So for him to be absent from the place would suggest that it was quite serious. Look, for him to be admitted to hospital, of course it was serious, but the most important thing is that he's on the mend. And I got some information towards the end of last week that I didn't put into the public domain because it's people's private life and their health, and it's not something to be discussed on a social platform. But I did get some information just round about the weekend there, Friday, Saturday, I think it was, that he was doing better and recovering at home, and the hope was that he could be back sooner rather than later. Now, of course, you'll all be asking me and screaming at your cameras right now, does that mean Eddie is back for the weekend match against Ipswich Town? Look, I don't think that decision has been officially made yet, and I think he needs to get through the rest of today and tomorrow's training session and a bit of work afterwards. But all going well, I think the hope would be that Eddie is back for that match against Ipswich on Saturday. And look, it's a good match to return to as well, isn't it? Of course it is, because it's against a team in Ipswich who are struggling near the bottom of the table. But look, I think more importantly, it's at home. There's no travelling involved, there's no hotel stay, there's no time away from the family. It involves minimum fuss, if you like, and I think it'd be a good one for him to ease himself back in for, had he missed this Saturday, and then taking charge of the next game against Brighton away. That would involve travelling, flights, overnight stay. It might not have been as easy on him, so I think he'll want to ease himself back in. And look, I think the club and Jason Tindall, whenever he's spoken, have been fairly consistent on this, that Eddie will only return when he feels able to do so, fit and well enough to do so. But you do look at the match against Aston Villa on Saturday night, and had Newcastle won, of course they're in a commanding position with regards to qualifying for the Champions League. There might not have been quite the need for him to be back this weekend, but I think Eddie will have looked at that and felt, look, it's time for me to be back now. he will want to play a part between now and the end of the season, and I think that it's the sort of thing where Eddie's return on Saturday will get the stadium up for it, even more so than they would be already. And you know, it'll probably be quite an emotional day, having missed a manager for the last couple of weeks, a manager who of course is now a legend at the football club, having managed them to silverware just last month at Wembley and ending that 7-decade-long trophy drought. So look, I think it's a good game for him to return to, because it's at home. You know, a more than winnable game. Atmosphere should be good. No travelling involved. And I just feel if he was feeling well enough, it's a good game for him to come back to. And Eddie will be looking at this and thinking, I don't want to leave this another game, because obviously the performance against Villa wasn't great, and he will not want anything sort of going stale, you know, and he won't want to come back with a mountain to climb. And look, Newcastle are still in a strong position with regards to qualifying for the Champions League, and you know, it still looks fairly good if they can win the matches that they need to win. And this match against Ipswich on Saturday, of course, is an absolute must-win, a must-win match, because you know, you could almost allow points being dropped in perhaps the Arsenal game or the Brighton game. But this is a game that at home 3 points is a must, in my opinion, if Newcastle are to qualify for the Champions League next season, and Eddie will want to be part of that. So look, it's not happened at a good time. There never is a good time, but you know, the good news is it's not taking months to recover. Pneumonia sometimes can take sort of 2, 3, 4 months to recover, but you know, Eddie's a fit young man, and he's managed to recover from it quicker than expected. It'll be interesting to see if he does his press conference tomorrow. I've not had any steer from the club on that. My feeling would be probably will want to do it. As I say, he's a very hands-on manager and likes to sort of control the narrative. So I would be surprised if he doesn't do his press conference. But on the flip side of that, it'd probably be quite an easy thing to get out of not speaking to us guys at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning if he wanted to give that one a swerve. And let's say, look, Jason Tyndall has done terrifically well in his absence, and look, he's done well both off the pitch and on it. Those brilliant wins against Manchester United and Crystal Palace absolutely blew both those teams away, but I just felt like that Saturday performance against Aston Villa was just one too many games for the team. Perhaps needed a little bit of freshening up, but I can understand why Jason didn't do that. And I think those changes and freshening up will come this weekend. I expect Anthony Gordon to come back into the team, and perhaps maybe a little change in midfield as well. But yeah, look, good news for all concerned. Eddie back in at the training ground, just over the trees there behind me this morning, taking the session, and all going well today and tomorrow. He will be back in the dugout at St James's Park on Saturday, and it's a sight, of course, that everyone will want to see after being very worried after that pneumonia diagnosis just over a week ago. So that's it from me, guys, at the training ground today. I'll be back with further here tomorrow after the press conference. Leave your comments below. Please subscribe if you haven't done already, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers now. Bye bye.